top? Or...
Yeah, it's from the top.
All right, sweet. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Design and Dissection. I've got the design, he's got the dissection. Today, we are going to be talking about our campaign diaries. I have 2 sessions to get through today.
I got 2 sessions as well. We're also going to be talking some dungeon design.
Absolutely.
All right, you want to go first?
Sure. You went first, and the one I guess I can go first.
Yeah. Just an aside, we recorded this already, but there was no audio, so we're trying again.
You know, I always thought it was BS when YouTubers like record a full video and they say they had no audio for it, but I can see how it happens.
Yeah, the lights were on and everything.
Yeah, the light was on. Whatever. We're over it. But okay, so I guess
new campaign.
Yeah, the Amaea began with episode 1 about 3 weeks ago. At this point, our players Jim, Charlie, and Josh are
co-hosts of the Iron Light Show.
Yep, Charlie and Josh. I just totally combined their names. Charlie.
I know you did. We're in too deep. We can't reshoot.
Yeah, but Jim here is playing Erlander, a fighter wizard, which is pretty interesting,
especially considering he's paraplegic.
Yes, the wheelchair has proven a tool, nonetheless. We also have Charlie playing Huang, who is our ranger rogue, and also blind.
Totally didn't coordinate that, so it was pretty awkward.
Yeah, they totally just brought up 2 characters, both with. They're like, yeah, we're gonna do this, that. Also, my character's blind.
It was awkward for Josh's character.
Yeah,
because she wasn't in on it.
No, absolutely not. So Josh is playing D9 drummer, our barbarian with the wild soul archetype.
Who was featured in a one-shot that Charlie DM'd in the world of Targonra.
Yeah, pretty much every PC is like kind of an NPC or other character that existed in worlds these 3 have played in before. That was like the opening prompt. So Drummer's like kind of coming back from that one-shot. Erlander is somewhere in the world of... the Epics and Emprises campaign.
Yep. Spoiler alert for Charlie, who I think was just kind of figuring it out.
Yeah. And Huang is from Josadius, Charlie's campaign. If you want to know more about that, obviously go check out the Iron Light after you finish this video.
Link in the. It's going to be one of these corners.
Yeah, it flips. It's weird. But. They were conscripted by Oak, the Oakland Adventuring Company, this interplanar organization that takes heroes from one place and puts them in locations where they might be better suited. These guys are currently Worms, which is the lowest rank of adventurer. And they've been going through training for the last couple of months, and session 1 was their exam to get promoted and start going on actual quests. The exam day started with their mentor, Papka Polimo, this pugilist sort of kind of guy, rounding up his team, kind of briefing them on what the rest of the day is going to go like, and setting them loose. They had a little bit of free time to move around Oak, and interact with some of the NPCs there. They got some coffee. They met an Icegish, and then they met this really mean monk, who they kind of had some playful words with.
Words, excluding any names.
Yeah, yeah. They tried so hard to get her name. They even asked the headmaster, but I didn't drop it that easily. But after those interactions, we kickstarted the test. They were brought down into this teleportation room where their mentor and this other figure were. They got seated inside of this teleportation circle, and that's when things sort of started to go wrong. The spell that was being cast, Erlander was able to notice that there was more going on with this spell than normal, and this massive red like fissure appeared throughout the circle towards the end of the spell's casting, pulling Popka in with them. When they finally arrive at their destination, they are engulfed in water. They had fallen into this little basin, and so the first challenge was for them to get out of that, which was hard given that Erlander is in a wheelchair, Huang is blind.
And it was compounded by the fact that I took chainmail as my starting equipment. So Erlander is sitting in a chainmail snuggie in a wheelchair, and that's all sinking real fast.
So the players act quickly. You doff your chainmail snuggie. I make you do a check for it just because there's usually like a duration for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the players are able to get out of the water. Drummer is kind of like working overtime during this entire exam.
Yeah, she was the meat of the operation for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Like the potatoes of the meal, whatever it is. But Drummer goes down and grabs the snuggie again, and upon grabbing it, realizes that this little basin, at the bottom there's this grate, and on the other side is a massive serpent. Now this is foreshadowing for later, obviously, but at the time it was like sort of this victory that it was on the opposite side of the grate. I'll say. The players, after Drummer resurfaces, they notice that Popka had come with them through this teleportation process, which they were not told would happen.
That was pretty surprising.
He was incredibly injured on an upper level of this dungeon. Now, this dungeon is like a massive like cylinder with there's five floors and then sheer walls up to the surface of the ground after that. And Popka's on the second floor. He had fallen from the teleportation portal, which is currently up at the surface of the dungeon. That's where they had come in from. These guys got lucky. They landed in the water as was intended, but Popka landed on a stone ledge and was horrendously injured. So their first task, or their first objective, became to save him in some way. Through working around the dungeon's obstacles, using the chain, using some rope, and your unseen servant, the players were able to get up to Popka, cauterize his wounds, and stabilize him. From that point on, it was kind of up to them to figure out like how this place worked. My initial design with the dungeon featured a lot of like weird branching pathways, so I didn't really know where they would go. But it seemed like they were dead set on climbing as fast as possible through ever the shortest means.
We saw a bunch of closed doors and just a wide open path up.
Yeah. So. See, I tried making it hard to just go straight up. Like on the first floor, there's no way to get to the second floor straight up. But you guys used the chain and the rope, which I thought was a pretty cool solution.
The drummer carries a 20-foot chain.
Yeah. But so you guys get to the second floor, but on the second floor there's a stairway to the third floor, and then on the third floor, you guys decide to stop climbing after that. I think Huang unlocks one of the locked doors on this floor, and you guys find the first of 3 water gates. You guys don't know that's what it is at the time. When Drummer finally like pulls on the lever, the door comes swinging open, water comes pouring out, and suddenly this pit is filling up with water. Drummer gets knocked down to the first floor from the initial gust of this of the initial wave, I guess. And in fishing around on the first floor, she finds a magical item that she's not interested in at all.
A white knife that radiated a murderous magical aura.
Yeah, she used her Wild Soul Barbarian feature to like detect magic. which let her find the secret room that I had drawn out. But she was kind of in a rush because the water on the first floor was filling up, and pretty soon she'd be submerged if she was still down there. So Drummer makes it back up to the party, and at this point the party's kind of lost. They have to decide where they're going to go from here, and it's not really clear how they can get up to the surface. So they decide to go through the pipe that the water came from. I didn't really plan for this at the time, so I was kind of.
And we didn't notice.
Yeah,
so it blended really well.
I'm glad, but the party goes up this pipe, and at this point, I'm kind of just like putting things in where I can. So I decide, you know what, this pipe is going to have a bit of an incline, and it's going to come out to this massive tank, and then the party they get there obviously, and they start looking around. I have to decide, all right, well, they have to find something. So I put a massive, like, beached whale in this tank. And this is when the pieces started to come together for me. It was kind of easy to, like, introduce something that I had shown Josh, or Drummer's character, back on the first floor when she was looking around. One of the hunter dead bodies. I kind of leaned on that aspect of the pit and made this massive whale related to it, in that they're both pale, they both smell sort of the same, only this thing has like a bunch of faces that are crying out. Jim, you made a reference to envy.
Yeah, FMA style.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of what I was going for. Maybe unknowingly when I first designed it. But Huang is like totally determined that there is something underneath this whale, which didn't exist beforehand. So he's like lifting up the blubber,
like most things.
Yeah,
like most good things in D&D.
Exactly. But Huang's like lifting up the blubber, and he finds these baby hunters, which are
little things.
Yeah, they're little enemies that I borrowed from Other Side, a game I used to stream. But they like are very like skittish, so they like run away as soon as Huang like unveils them from under this massive whale. I thought about having a combat encounter here, but it didn't really make sense given that we had like a good 10 minutes left in the session at this point.
Yeah.
After like all of the platforming puzzles, Drummer getting knocked down to the first floor, and then finding all of these weird sideways back up to the third, we had taken a lot of time, and they had all of the pieces of the puzzle, so I didn't want to like arbitrarily extend the session. But towards the end of that first session, we get Drummer climbing up out of the pipe. There's like a higher pipe inside of this tank room where the water comes in from, as well as some other things which the players learn about. This gasoline scented gas. But Drummer climbs through this pipe and makes it out to the surface. At this point, she could leave, going back through the portal that they came in from.
And the rest of us would be left to find our own way out. Yeah. With unconscious Popka, or coming back to consciousness Popka, in tow.
But obviously she decides not to. Power of friendship wins yet again. And the party comes up with this plan for Drummer to lower a rope and have them climb up from the third floor. That's where the first half of the first half of the 2-part session ends, I guess. In episode 2, we open with a little bit of we have a cutscene where we kind of explain how things work at Oak through a coffee delivery to the headmaster. Mondo, the coffee giant, tells his son to go deliver some coffee, which his son realizes he has some other things he has to do, so he tries to pawn off on some adventurers, and then the adventurers have to relinquish the cup to their mentor because they're late for something, and then the mentor realizes the cup's for the headmaster, people change hands with the coffee quite a bit, but the main thing about this cutscene, it kind of shows the underground of Oak and sort of what they're doing. They have all of these red gems locked away in their basement vaults. This weird character named Sagat, a massive spider who kind of like runs things down there. And at the end of it all, the headmaster receives his coffee, and it's exactly the temperature he wanted. Sort of like he knows what's going on. He always knows what's going on.
Pre-session or start of the session cutscene was a really cool like new tradition that you've started, and I want to put a pin in that. We'll come back to it after you finish your campaign diary.
Oh yeah, for sure. So after that, the headmaster receives his coffee, and on the screen, he sees the players taking their exam. He's been watching, and he commands a load-in to begin phase 2. This is the point at which the gasoline-scented gas begins to fill the tank yet again. It's
also the point at which we realized that this was the exam. We had thought that. I mean, Papka screaming "wrong place," getting his like guts torn up by impacting onto this stone walkway. Like we thought that we were like, where in the multiverse are we? But seeing that cutscene, we're like, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. It was cool.
I felt like in the first session, there was like a lot of question about like, what should we do? But it never felt like, okay, we're totally directionless. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Just go up, right? But this gas comes into the room and the players don't know what's happening exactly, but this gas is exciting the whale, acting as some sort of catalyst for something to occur. This whale is actually pregnant, and inside is sort of like a cocooned hunter, an adult version of it. And so the players leave the tank. Huang and Papka head down the pipeway, and they wait for Erlander to slide down this 45-degree ramp. But
I'm gonna sit in the wheelchair, lean back against the pipe, so when I go down, I rock onto my wheels and continue to slide forward instead of falling on my face. You guys need me to explain that again? All right, I get it.
Yeah. I was so confused of everything that was going on, but you know what? It worked out.
You might have a little aphantasia too.
Yeah, I was a little lost. Usually it's just with long series of events, I struggle with pairing them all together. But you figure it out, you pass your acrobatics check. But something
surprisingly, with a -1 dex.
It was a pretty good roll. But
shout out to my cousin Kia, who gave me an excellent new set of dice that I've been using for this campaign. They have not failed me much.
Well, you guys passed your exam, so. That said, after making your check, something is following you. It's making large bounds after you. It's not like quite like going as fast as you are as you're like totally rolling down this ramp, but it's keeping up. Up at the surface, Drummer is like lowering down the chain rope combination so that it can...
The rope which we pulled out of an explorer's pack.
Yeah. Dude, that actually comes up again.
Yeah.
But, this hunter that clawed its way out of the whale makes contact with the party. And at the same time, there's a group of adventurers who mysteriously are climbing out of the water, which is exactly where the players came from. They're not quite sure where they like originated, but they're here now. One of the adventurers in the water points their crossbow at Erlander, and I have everyone roll for initiative.
Yeah, we were not stoked to be fighting these people in the water.
Yeah.
I was planning on using magnified gravity to pull them to the bottom, but
Oh, that
here's that
cool.
subversion of expectations.
Yeah, I had to throw in one more twist because the adventurer firing the crossbow was not firing at Erlander. He was firing at the massive hunter right behind him. And so the adventurers are working with the party in this situation. I really hoped you guys would go first in initiative and like there'd be some antagonism between you two, but it didn't work out that way.
It is what it is.
Yeah. So they have this fight with the hunter. Huang gets in melee with it very early on, but gets downed in the hunter's first turn, I'm pretty sure. And then kicked away, so he takes another fail, or he takes a fail on one of his death saves. Drummer is on the surface at the start of the combat, so she spends her first turn basically like gliding down the rope to get to the hunter and help Huang. Erlander, what were you doing in that fight?
During that fight, I think the first turn I cast Magnify Gravity anyways, which is a Dunamancy spell that Matt Mercer came up with and is in the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. And that spell pretty much just like does force damage. It crushes the opponent. But it was very much on flavor with Erlander as having come from the world of Epics and Emprises. He was a lot more in tune with that type of magic than some of the other stuff in like traditional D&D. But yeah, I did a total of 5 damage, I think. I was pretty proud of myself for it. And then Drummer did the rest, like the other 50.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure like the damage went like the crossbow guy hit the hunter for like 10 damage. You did like 5.
It failed a save, or if it passed a save.
Yeah,
so.
it passed a save, so it did like 5 damage. And then Drummer came in for like 20 that turn, and then on Drummer's next turn critted it and killed it. It was a little wild, but you know, reckless attack. It happens.
She's the meat and potatoes. I'm just gravity.
So the players finish off this hunter. It's like starts like twitching. Its bones start cracking. It's not quite dead. Like it wants to be alive, but the physical nature of it just doesn't allow it to continue. That said, the combat encounter is not quite done because in the room are the fledgling hunters. And fledgling hunters have this ability called Fright Cloak, which is whenever they're attacked, as a response, they turn invisible.
And this is where the encounter got interesting.
Yeah. So the players are spending their time trying to get Huang stabilized. At the same time, these invisible fledgling hunters are biting at the rope so that the players can't escape. The other adventurers who are in the water are climbing up right now, and just below them, the rope is basically falling down. So there's this brand new problem of how do we get Erlander and Huang to the surface in one piece while these invisible hunters are like cutting off every exit possible.
Our plan was to stick back, stabilize Huang, let the other adventurers go up and, you know, pull us up in turn. But with, you know, 50 of our 80 or our 70 feet of rope now, you know, lost its integrity, we kind of were in a bind.
Yeah. You guys tried a lot of different things, but it wasn't until the snake broke out of its of the undercage that I think things started to progress again.
Well, we were in a very lengthy process of like within initiative, taking torches from the explorers pack, lighting up the torches because we had noticed that the whale had like a really negative reaction when I lit a torch earlier. So we figured that this might be able to keep the fledgling hunters at bay. So we were lighting up torches. We looted Huang's explorer's pack because he also had 50 feet of rope that hadn't been chewed through by hunters, and we tied these torches like into the rope like every 20 feet so that the light would kind of keep the hunters away from it.
Dude, it was honestly genius.
And then the snake broke out.
Yeah. So this gas that's pouring in, it has an effect on Drummer's rage. It also has an effect on these hunters. It has an effect on pretty much anything that inhales it, but it's not noticeable in most people. But it incites anger in those that are receptive to it, I'll say. So for the hunter, it incited it to claw out of its mother. And for the serpent, it incited it to break through the grate that was at the bottom of the water. So the serpent is eating the fledgling hunters that have fallen into the water after the rope broke. Every like turn cycle, it snaps one up, and then they see the snake descend back into the water.
We're just like, that thing's a bro, man. We got an ally in this pit.
Yeah. So with the snake sort of distracting the fledglings, Erlander is able to tie the rope to his chair.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of lash myself and Huang's unconscious body into the rope system as Drummer climbs up to the top.
Yeah. And at the top, Drummer sees that everyone else is gone. So there's no group pull set up. She's going to have to do it all on her own.
50 pounds of chainmail, like 300 pounds of dude, probably 20 pounds of wheelchair. It's tough.
Yeah. So they're lashed at the bottom of this thing. Drummer's at the ceiling, pulling them up. They're going up, but the serpent runs out of hunters to eat. And it sees this nice dangling meal just above the surface of the water. So it comes up and tries to eat them. It gets a mouthful of Erlander's chair, and now we've got this tug of war going on between the serpent and Drummer. And the serpent's kind of getting the better of Drummer at the start of this like lock.
Not for lack of trying. I blasted off a firebolt, and then since I've got those 2 levels in fighter, hit it with that action surge firebolt again for a total of like 9.
Yeah, it had resistance to fire damage because it was like soaking wet.
It's important to remember that I'm still a level 1 wizard under all the HP and armor.
Yeah, it happens. But at the end of it all, Drummer is able to pass a athletics check to break the grapple with the serpent, so you guys are pulled out of its mouth. It has to go back under the water just to breathe. And just as you guys are at the tip, it comes back up for one last bite. But prestidigitation comes in clutch.
I was like, oh geez, this thing's coming. Drummer's not gonna necessarily, like, I don't think Drummer's got another big pull in her. So I'm like, what can I do? Not fire. It's got its mouth wide open, handful of pepper, prestidigitates, dropped into the mouth.
There wasn't any rules for this. I just sort of went with it. Yeah, obviously it was
a non-magical trinket.
It's a non-magical trinket, yeah. There's just no rules for what do you have to make a save for when someone throws pepper in your face. What kind of save is that? Who knows? But yeah, with the pepper, they're able to make it back over the surface without the serpent grabbing at them. Drummer makes one more loop around to make sure that Popka isn't around somewhere nearby, but they go through and they pass their exam. On the other side, there's the injured Popka, the other adventurers, and a slew of faculty who have been waiting their arrival. Each of the players get pulled aside by their role mentor. So tanks all get taught by Thunk, the Unstoppable. All of the mages get taught by Ilodin, the Eternal Prodigy, and all of the skill monkeys get taught by Princess Rooney, the Everything Bagel. So each of them have a conversation with their role mentor about their exam, how they did, and plans going forward. Erlander passed his with flying colors. Ilodin was mostly just intrigued about weird solutions to puzzles.
Which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Drummer got a B- from Thunk because she stepped away from her team. He's very much like you have to be dependable and always there. But because she came back and was on time, he gave her a pass as well. Princess Rooney was going to fail Huang, however. Huang died early on in the second half of the session. And in the first part of the session,
he went down, he didn't die.
Or he didn't die, sorry.
That would have been weird.
Yeah. Yeah, he went down. Dude, that would have been wild. That would have been a different session.
Yeah.
But Huang going down and not having as much of an impact raised some questions for Princess Rooney about whether or not adventuring is going to be for him. You know, he has a lot of things stacked up against him already. And she basically gives him one last opportunity to prove that he can do it. She asks him to exit the room. And this is an encounter for Huang. After losing his walking stick, he was blind before, but now he doesn't even have the blind sight. So he starts using his tracking skills to try and find the door he came in from. He realizes it's not there. He's just like in an open field somewhere. But he finds a trail of breadcrumbs, specifically crumbs from an everything bagel. And it leads him to where Princess Rooney is sitting on a bench. They have one last talk about determination and what it really means to be an adventurer, a bit about Huang's past. And Huang decides that he's going to stay, that he does have what it takes and that he wants to be an adventurer. And I thought that was a really good conclusion, especially because he wasn't able to get as much role playing in the last session and the first half of this one. And so with that, all three of them pass, and
then we Wang Chung'd.
Yeah, you guys Wang Chung'd. we had their graduation ceremony, and they are runners.
Awesome. So before we get to my campaign diary, I put a pin in. Let's take it out right now. Let's talk about some campaign traditions. So a few things that you've kind of done with the campaign that we've sort of already experimented with in the group are DJs.
Yeah.
So rather than I think this started in the Pragasvar campaign that Josh ran. He totally offloaded music onto the players, and he was like, "Well, if I need to change the musical cue, I will. But you guys can play whatever you want otherwise." And also having an initiative monkey.
Yeah.
I quickly adopted that tradition. It's just really nice to have a player keep track of initiative. Another thing I noticed that you did was you used a survey. I had, a year before I started the Epics and Emprises campaign, but I ended up using it maybe in a bit I don't know. It was also, I think they were equally as important to determining like what roles characters would be apt with.
Yeah.
A few traditions that are new, cutscenes at the start of the sessions. I don't know if you were planning on continuing this, but I thought it worked really well. It was pretty cool. And what you did during session 0.
What did I do during session 0?
You asked us all a question.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is something that I would definitely recommend to other DMs out there. I think there's this unhealthy like obsession with I have all the secrets, I know everything, sort of DM hood. But I think it can be fun to open world building up to your players. What I did with them,
very bold move.
Oh yeah,
very hot take.
But I asked them like one big question about world building. I asked Jim here, why are psionics illegal? The telekinesis, telepathy, and your answer was that when you engage with someone telepathically, your minds sort of melt together over time, right? And this can become irreversible, which I thought was awesome. I've done some writing on that already.
Oh boy.
I asked Charlie what the name of Oak's competitor was, and he said the Progenitors, and I've done some writing on them. So they're gonna be a player. And then I asked Josh, what is dangerous about teleportation? And he said that there can be physical anomalies and sort of like bad things that can happen to your body over the course of like going from one plane to another. So I've fleshed out all 3 of these aspects. It was kind of like a just give me an answer right now sort of thing. They didn't like go home and like study for this. I just had them shoot from the hip. Some of them were more apt to that than others, but I thought it worked really well. And it'll come into play more later on. I think we'll touch on it again in the future in another episode, but that's a big one.
Yeah.
I didn't the cutscenes thing, by the way, going back to that, I didn't invent that. That's something that Josh did in Bragisbar.
I had seen him do. I mean, I know that Josh is wont to do cutscenes. We had a few of them towards the end of the Mura campaign, but like starting off every session with him. I don't know. I guess you've got a big decision before our next session tomorrow. If you're gonna continue that or if you're gonna let it die. But I thought it was pretty cool.
Oh no, I'm definitely gonna do it.
Sweet.
Yeah. If I don't do one, it's because I forgot to say it and I have already written it. But no, we're going to keep going with those for as long as I can.
Nice. That's awesome. Another new tradition, you've got the ranks and the jobs with Oak. That might just be an Oak thing, but it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I felt like Oak was super like militaristic in a way. How they have acronyms for everything. They have ranks for things that really don't need ranks. But I think it added a lot to being able to just describe a character. I'm like, yeah, this guy over here is a getter. So you know that he's esteemed in some way.
Yeah.
I can tell you his role. You can already start making assumptions about him. It kind of helps in that sense, you know.
Yeah. Last new tradition. The multiverse. We had always talked about different campaigns existing somewhere in the multiverse in our canons, but you're the first person to really pull that together.
Yeah, that's the Oak's motto. We keep worlds together, baby. It's an experiment. I think it might have been overly ambitious, but we're gonna see where that goes.
We haven't been punished for it yet, so
yeah,
super cool. I mean, all of our characters come from a different plane, from a different D&D world that we've played in, which is just so cool. I don't know. I guess we should probably get over to my campaign diary.
Yeah.
Last time I recounted it, I was pretty scatterbrained, so I think I'm just gonna speed through it and see what happens.
Go for it.
So we had 2 sessions: Cartographers of the Cavalosa Catacombs and What We Do in the Shadows. We left our party, the 3 players, as well as the 3 goth kids and Nora, the college librarian, were in the catacombs under Cavalosa. So this first session was the dungeon. So I took an unhealthy amount of time to prep for this dungeon. I created sort of a map of the city that's like a real work in progress. But I also created a map of the catacombs. I took a lot of inspiration from the Paris catacombs and the Odessa catacombs. And I'll show a picture like here, I think. And pretty much the major challenge of this dungeon was to navigate. So I did a little bit of technological innovation for this dungeon. I created some HTML, CSS, JavaScript that blacked out the entire dungeon, the entire image of the dungeon, except for a little circle, like a little yellow halo of light that you could see within. And you could move that around using WASD. And man, this session was really weird. It was
cool.
There was a power outage.
Oh yeah.
So my dad had to start the generator so that I could download my data from the server and put it on my laptop. Then I had to speed over to Josh's house and get everything together. Sam didn't show up for the first couple hours, so Ollie slipped on a pool of blood and was knocked unconscious with no roll, because if you're not there to roll for your character,
you failed the roll.
You failed the roll is what I'm going with. But yeah, once all that technical difficulty was aside, I had Josh on the left of me, who had all the camera displays on so that I could see just Houston. And Houston was watching my stream on Discord as I tabbed around, or as I like moved around this little reticle. And it worked out to be pretty interesting because they role played into that. So Kylian was mapping out the dungeon as Callum was using magic to illuminate and look around and say, here's an intersection, here's a dead end or whatever.
That was super cool, like trying to like co-op with Kylian, try to figure out, is this the same, is this like the E highway that we had before, yeah, having all these like weird letters for these different intersections that we had come up with, getting lost, realizing some weird stuff.
Yeah, up. So the players were drawing, specifically Kylian was drawing out the map in real time as they navigated through this place, because I just dumped them in and I didn't give any hooks. I was just like, all right, which way do you want to go? Here's what you see. So they had to keep track of intersections. The big challenge of this episode was navigating through the ossuary, finding a way out. And I put in a little, I put in some Easter eggs. They fell into the catacombs underneath the mortician's place, the morgue. So the tunnels in that region were designed in the shape of the Japanese character Shi for death. God, I was talking to Philip the night before, and I was like, hey man, do you think I should include an Amogus in the tunnels? And he was like, yeah, you should include an Amogus. So I did. And that actually worked out to be like extremely challenging for them to navigate, because everything else was sort of like rectangular, straight, parallel, perpendicular lines. But this had a lot of curves. And they navigated from one foot to the other foot and didn't realize that they ended up in the same corridor. So they keep going, and Kylian's like, I'm noticing some motifs. We see this F-shaped pattern here, and now we're seeing an F-shaped pattern again. I wonder if there's some like order to this. But no, they just got mixed up.
It was just the same hallway, dude. That when we realized, it was such a mind blow.
I mean, God, like, I can't imagine. That just must have made you guys feel like, oh, we're never getting out of here.
Dude, I was like, we have to go back to the rats. I was like, we must go back to the rats.
Yeah, so I had a few exits that were designed into the dungeon that I didn't really want them to take. Obviously, looking at the map, I didn't flesh out the entire ossuary because I was working with limited time. I was like, I just need to fire on this. So there were a couple of paths where if they walked too long, there was a cave-in or there was a gap or something. But there was one exit where after they had played for about an hour, they went in this direction and they saw rats. And I guess I had made the mistake of telling Josh the night before, like, yeah, if you guys try to go the wrong way, I'll just throw some rats in or something. But no, this exit would have led into the Gardens District and out of the dungeon, and we would have just had a short session and done some like around town stuff after that. But no, we ended up they ended up not going that way. I guess I probably used the NPCs to tell them, like, yeah, these rats might have diseases or something. You might get bit. So they ended up deciding not to go past the rats. So they went back into the dungeon. And they noticed that there were some regions of like long highways with like sporadic dead ends, offshoots, and then there were other regions that were mostly rectangular. This was, I mean, like looking at the Odessa Catacombs, I came up with it, but I kind of just like didn't design it with great thought about what was in the overworld. I was just like, hey, I mean, you got a bunch of bodies, you get in there and you just start digging like ants. You need a place to put them.
Yeah. It made sense for sure. It was like walking through it, I was like, man, there's a whole lot of dead in here.
Yeah. My biggest regret was I wish I could have encoded a little bit more like intentional information about the age of the remains, like the like air currents and stuff, because you guys tried to use that to navigate. I really didn't give you much, so I mean, props to the players.
I mean, the design of the dungeon like helped for sure. Like, I think we made it more complicated on ourselves a lot of the time than it needed to be.
It was cool.
But I definitely enjoyed, like, the mapping it out.
So the party went they just took a nap. They had been in there for hours and they were hungry and they needed a rest or they were going to take some exhaustion penalties. At that point, Sam joins the call. So I was like, yeah, you know what, Ollie, you could just navigate over to them. They actually were pretty close to the start. They had gone way to the left, or way to the east and then back to the west, not super far away from the entry point. So Ollie was able to find them and meet back up with the party. Not after the party had woken up and they found a well that they tried to climb out of. And they were able to, Kylian and Callum were able to push together.
Emperor's New Groove style.
Emperor's New Groove style, baby. They were able to push together, but they couldn't make vertical progress.
As it turns out, it's way harder than it looks in the movie.
Yeah, and the streets were bustling, so nobody was really able to hear them shout out of this well. At a certain point, god dang, I'm doing it again. Backing up before that, they had heard some voices, some people shouting, and when they, or not shouting, but they heard people's voices, they heard some scuffling around, and when they shouted out to them, these people ran away. And it turns out that it was a group of people who were disposing of a murder victim in the catacombs. So when they heard other people, they were like, we just got to dump this and go. But I let these guys find another body and harvest another urn full of blood, which was nice. So 2 urns and a little bit of change.
Yeah, we needed that for sure.
Ollie meets back up with them. Pretty shortly, they find like this long straightaway that leads them, out of this like zone of the ossuary. They go like for a long time. There's an offshoot to the left, which they ignore. That would have led to the archives under the college. And then there was another branch off left. I'm not going to spoil what's in there because it may be relevant in the future, but there was a little like lore drop, I suppose, or a conspiracy that they were going to walk in on that I had planned a little bit, but they stuck to the right, and I was like, well, who am I to decide where things are?
How about I step in now on time 89 of deciding left or right?
And they make it to a new ossuary in the northern island of Cavalosa. And that's where we called the first session. In the second session, what we do in the shadows, they continued around this ossuary a little bit until they came to a dead end where there was resting a like satchel and a glow globe or mage stone or wear light or whatever you want to call it, like a magically enchanted stone that glows. And they were pretty perplexed by this. So they picked up the stuff, figured they could use the supplies since they were so hungry. And as Ollie turns around and double takes, he notices a girl who asked him if he had seen her dog. She got lost in the catacombs searching for her dog that scrambled in there somehow. The other players couldn't see this girl. Ollie, Sam, if you're listening, the girl was a ghost. These guys continue through the dungeon, and they find the dog eventually. And the girl seems like catatonic. She's not really responding. She's just kind of following along. And as they find the dog, somebody looks around the corner and spots a ghoul. This, like pale humanoid, matted blood on its mouth, exaggerated physical features, long nails, and it attacks them. Combat with the ghoul. Gosh, this ended up being a really cool combat encounter. Ghouls, I guess I don't want to go into too much because reasons that you'll understand. But ghouls are very similar to vampires. I guess they would be considered like vampire spawn in 5e D&D. Like they've got really enhanced physical features. This one was kind of weakened because it had just been underground and starved for so long. So out of the gate, this thing slashes Nora, and she actually faints from the blood loss. And Callum is the only source of light in this dungeon. Kylian zaps it with electricity. Ollie takes a couple of stabs at it and misses. And this thing grips onto Kylian, and it bites down on her neck and her shoulder. Callum tries to stabilize Nora, and the lights go out. Kylian manages to break away, but she gets clawed on the arms, and it just proves too much. She falls back, knocks her head, and is out. Ollie drags his machete against the wall to create sparks and uses the little bit of light to find this thing and strike true, but he too is knocked down, and it's just left to Callum, who has nothing else to do but cast Flash. Callum knows how to create two types of light with Flash, visible and ultraviolet, and I said, which kind of light do you want to make?
I went ultraviolet. I was absolutely ultraviolet.
He closes his eyes, lets out this, blinding flash of invisible light, and when he opens them, the cavern's illuminated by the ghoul, flesh literally burning, turning to a pile of dust. Mysterious
awesome.
footsteps approach. These guys don't catch a beat. So Callum pretends like he's asleep as this man wearing a trench coat with a mysterious pin comes by, and he's checking out the bodies, and he notices bite marks. He checks their vital signs, notices people are awake, and he sees the bite marks in Kylian's arm, and he starts to bleed the wound. Callum wakes up and he's like, bro, what?
Yeah, I was so confused. I was like, I expected like someone to come through and leave us alone or kill us all. One of the two. Not bleed the wound. I was a little shocked.
Yeah. So this is where the story gets a little bit hard to tell because there's a bunch of splitting the party. But essentially, this guy says, I wasn't fast enough, but it looks like you've taken care of this threat. Here, follow me. I'm going to get you out of this catacombs. So he quickly brings the party. He like lifts up Nora and Ollie like they're nothing, and Callum drags Kylie in. The guy unlocks a door and takes Callum up into a building where they can they're above surface again. The guy says that he has to monitor Kylian, so he's going to leave the other three in a room to rest up, come back to their senses, and he's going to monitor Kylian for a little while. After a little bit, Callum pieces together that they're in the headquarters of the Every Few Daily, where they had been just a couple days ago, the newspaper. When Callum goes to check on Kylian, she's missing. The guy had brought her down to the catacombs, and he told her that she'd been bitten by a ghoul, and there's a chance that she'll turn, and he basically is going to make sure that if that happens, she's isolated from people and doesn't go on a rampage. Callum had when the guy originally came downstairs, see, I'm getting my timeline screwed up. He asked Callum what they were doing down there, noticed the urns, and said, "Oh, you must be with the black box." And Callum just kept his mouth shut. But when this guy questioned Kylie, and she fessed up to the truth, how they were being blackmailed into collecting this blood, and the guys came back upstairs and he said, "Callum, why don't you be honest with me? Tell me why you were really down there." And Callum told the truth. And this guy took their third empty urn, filled it with wine, juice, water, and he said, "Bring this to where you need, to your destination. I promise I'll look out for you. But I got to keep an eye on Kylian."
I did not want to do that. That felt dangerous. We were like just got through being told if we did this, we would die. So it kind of took a lot for me to want to do that, but
yeah,
we did it.
Yep. So the two of them, Callum and Ollie, go back to the dorms for the night. They get a bite to eat. They pull the goth kids out of the well. They had left the goth kids at the well, and they pretty much lie low until it's time to meet at the rendezvous point. At which point they're gunny sacked. The urns are taken and they're led around and around, and then eventually down some stairs, and into the room that they had entered in the catacombs as they exited the locked room that the man had unlocked. Here they encounter not only the mobsters that brought them in, but a bunch of masked figures, and who are squabbling about stuff. Kylian is behind the door, and she can hear all this. And the man in the trench coat is present at this meeting, wearing a mask, but they can still recognize him by his trench coat and his pin. And he, as the urns are presented, he this guy steps forward and he tastes what's in the third one, and he said, "This isn't blood at all." And the mob boss, gives a look to the players or the player characters, and he's like, "Well, what did I tell you? We don't. If this isn't blood, then I suppose you'll still get what what we had agreed on." Mm. And the masked man walked over to the mob boss and backfisted him. It cracked the mob boss's mask and sent him flying like 20 feet. And the masked man in an instant was next to him and picked him up, lifted him by the shirt, and he said, none of this is what we agreed on. Blackmail, trophy hunts. We agreed that you would get the blood, and we agreed that it would be, as clean as it could be. These people are under my watch. Do better. And he kicks him out. Which is a big relief to the party.
Dude, yeah, finding that there's levels to the organized crime in the city is kind of nice.
Indeed.
For once.
Yeah. And that's where we called it, What We Do in the Shadows. And I guess it's a bit of a spoiler, but you guys had attended your first meeting of the Cavalosa Vampiric Council.
The Vampiric Council.
The Vampiric Council. You've seen how the world you've seen how the city operates. It's a very disorganized situation. There's no guards. There's no bureaucracy. So it kind of makes you wonder, what keeps everything on track? Criminal underworld.
Yeah. That's super cool.
And you can kind of see the inspiration of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure at this point. A lot of inspiration from Part 5, Golden Wind, mobs. Obviously, inspiration from the first 3 arcs with vampires. But yeah, that's where we left off. So we're a little bit over time, but we can just pretend that that's not real.
Yeah. What's time?
What's time? Who cares? We'll edit it out in post.
They watched the first hour and a half.
So dungeon design, man. Let's talk dungeon design, because we ran 2 very different dungeons, but I feel like they were both pretty successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to start with yours since we just talked about your dungeon?
Sure. So my dungeon design was it was very ambient. It was very, encounter light. And the challenge was more outside the game than, using game mechanics. There were a few encounters that I had planned. There were a few exits. And the way I dealt with them is, rather than saying that they were in a specific point, obviously there were some things that were in a specific point, like the bonus content underneath the college island. But for the most part, a lot of the encounters, like the rats, like the people dumping the body, like the location of the well, kind of floated around, and I was able to pin them down as they were needed. There was going to be a combat no matter which way you guys tried to exit. If you tried to exit the way of the rats, there was going to be a gator, probably. If you guys tried to exit the way of the rats, the ghoul would have been there instead.
Oh, okay.
If you had tried to exit through the well, there was going to be a gator that would fight the goth kids and either eat them if you guys didn't get down in time, or try to, or you would fight it.
Those poor goth kids.
Yeah, they've been through a lot. They're pretty stupid.
Wait, so real quick question. Did the 2 urns we gave to the vampires of actual blood, did they drink those? Are they going to use those? Is it canon?
You'll have to go back.
Very well.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's a good thing that they didn't, that Callum used ultraviolet to incinerate the ghoul, because if they had harvested its ghoul blood, that would have been the worst possible outcome.
Dude, I would have tried it. If it was still alive, I would have tried it, not knowing that that's what they... Oh my god.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gosh. Ghoul blood is very, ghoul and vampire blood is disgusting, bitter to vampires, unpalatable like human food. So yeah, they would have been pissed.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to contrast my dungeon, which was, a big sprawling corridor that was kind of encounter light, yours was a lot smaller, but a lot more encounter heavy and used mechanics and used resources pretty well. And I've got to say, I usually measure the success of a session 1 and session 2 by whether or not they force me to use my Explorer's Pack.
Yeah.
You did not only make me use my Explorer's Pack, you made me use Huang's Explorer's Pack. So it's just really good.
We ran out of materials that we had to have another one. See, there's a reason why they put 10 torches in there. We needed 8 of them, or however many you guys used.
I think it was 6 or 7, but yeah.
I think people underestimate how mundane problems can be.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's just, this is a stairway. It's just, there's 6 or 7 steps that are gone. That's really hard to traverse, if you think about it. And it can make all of your abilities seem really, really cool.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it makes you feel really smart for being able to put all the pieces together.
Yeah, especially if you're there's no way the DM thought of this. I'm going to do it this way. And you guys definitely did that 4 times in the session. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't know you could do that.
I think you've also got to remember that players have no idea what's in the DM's mind. It's just
yeah. True. But I think, actually, I do think that there were some problems with the way that I designed it. For one, in the first session, 9 out of 10 checks made were athletics checks. Now, it's not like I forced you guys to make athletics checks, but it just seemed like all of the problems were variants on the same kind of problem, right?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, it may have been reflective of our approach to things as well.
Yeah, maybe. No, I can see that for sure.
It's obviously a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we had drummer D9, the literal powerhouse, so.
Yeah. The D battery. I had some encounters that I had designed for each of you. The overall puzzle was Erlender's encounter from Elodin specifically. The methods on actually performing the puzzle answers were for drummer, because a lot of them required feats of strength.
Yeah, so Erlander was intended to call the shots, and drummer was intended to kind of make it happen.
Exactly. For Huang, though, I had a few very hyper-specific tasks for him. All of the vault doors were locked, so you would need to unlock them. So I kind of designed it Huang's good at unlocking things. He could figure that out. But also, those adventurers were in one of the rooms on the 2nd floor.
Oh.
And so when the water filled up, they couldn't it just started flooding in for them. So
yeah.
They're wow, we have to leave. They were holed up in a room because they were scared of the hunters that were in the area.
Gotcha.
But the water came in and started flooding, so they left. That was supposed to be a social encounter, which I also had designed for Huang in some sense. But it was kind of a weird way that you guys totally circumvented those, which was cool. It was cool.
Yeah.
I think it was just a problem with me being hyper specific with Huang's tasks. But I'm gonna do better with that in the future.
Yeah. Bit of general advice to anybody who's running a dungeon. I would say it doesn't hurt to over prepare a little bit. Create some encounters that you can throw in if you need them, but don't get too attached to making every encounter happen, because you're running a dungeon, not a gauntlet. Unless you are running a gauntlet, in which case,
yeah,
make them all happen.
Yeah, Hercules 11 labors or whatever.
But yeah, one of my big insecurities about the dungeon I ran, or things that I plan on doing better on in the future, is just the kind of sparsity of encounters. Some of it was informed by the nature of the dungeon. I mean, it's the ossuary, so it's not like some villain's hideout, except. Anyways, but there aren't massive caches of treasure or anything. It's for the most part just long hallways of skeletons.
Yeah. I think setting is a big thing that you have to pay attention to. As far as like when you're theming your dungeon, like what are the encounters actually going to be like? Is it going to be this long drawn out thing? Because I actually had a lot of fun with Josh mapping it out, and it would not have been remotely as fun if it were just like, okay, 20 minutes and we're done.
Yeah.
Right. The mapping process really needed for it to be extended. Whether or not we should do that like multiple times.
Yeah, I think that the novelty and innovation of it is a big part of the success of that dungeon. I don't plan on using that specific format again, of just navigate. Here you go. Unless there's really a dungeon that calls for it. But I did like the effect of not having the whole map, having to navigate around. And I'm definitely a map person, and I think I'm gonna try to stick with that. So always some element of needing to see around.
Yeah. No, that'll be super cool. I'm excited for it, especially when you start interweaving it with other things going on.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about this the whole time. Like, what if we needed to run away from someone during that whole situation? Like having a timer, some sort of limit, that would be a nightmare, but also really cool. So that could be another way to reprise it.
Yeah, which, I mean, you very well might have had to run if you actually had snuck up on the murderers.
Yeah.
And spooked them.
True. Or if
that was a combat encounter that you guys kind of unknowingly managed to get out of.
Sweet. We also snuck by the mortician.
Yeah, you did.
So I don't know if that would have turned into a combat. I mean, it was a combat encounter to begin with.
It was, yeah, man. The mortician, like, he's like a stand your ground kind of guy.
Yeah, we totally messed his day up. It was like a normal Tuesday for him. And we totally, I think we handled it wrong, but it's okay. We'll be okay. I don't think he's gonna rat out on us too. The guards.
Exactly. And you know what? It happened in like such a flash. He probably doesn't remember what you guys look like, so you guys aren't gonna have to worry about like running from a task force next session.
Yeah. All right. Sweet.
But yeah, at this point, the wedding massacre to what we do in the shadows, mob arc has kind of come to an end. So I've got some hooks that I'm preparing. I'm gonna send them out within the next couple of days to the players, and just get them off the island out into Olympia as at large, and see what kind of hijinks they get up to.
I'm stoked. Let's start exploring.
Yeah, because I could run a whole. At this point, I'm realizing I probably could run a pretty satisfying campaign, all contained within the city. It's been 7 sessions and it's worked out all right. But yeah, Kylian's character is designed for going, out into the ocean, and there are a lot of things rattling around in my head that I want you guys to see. So,
no, let's do it.
Yeah, man. Anything else?
No, we have episode 3 of the Amaea being played tomorrow.
Yep, and I think we're gonna shoot for episode 8 of E&E on next weekend.
I'm down with that. Let's do it.
Wait, like
2 weekends?
2 weekends, yeah.
Okay, 2 weekends.
Next week's weekend.
So in short, you guys have about another month before we get to the second video.
Yeah, I'm realizing now that recapping 2 sessions each is kind of like a stretch, but it was necessary for the dungeon discussion. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
as always, thanks for watching. When we get to 100 subs, we're going to make some merch. Like, subscribe, comment, share, react, stitch, duet, donate to our Patreon.
At 1 million subs, we're going to create a homebrew monster that's a 2-headed, dissected version of us.
Yup. Hold us to it, man.
1 million.
Take us to the moon.
To the moon. I'm going to see you guys in 4 years.
Bada bing, bada boom. To the moon.